Hello there, and welcome to this series of videos on advice and information around employment for people with sight loss. We're doing this by Skype, and we're chatting with Juji Heibel from Support from Sight for Essex. We're still in lockdown, so this is a bit of a new thing for all of us, so let's see how it goes.
Hi Juji, how are you?
Hi Colin, I'm really good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No, you're more than welcome. Do you just want to give us a little bit of a background about yourself and where you come from and your employment experience?
Thanks for having me, Colin. So I started working in this field 15 years ago as a job coach. The first couple of years I worked with people who had learning disabilities in London, and I supported them in their work placement and initially as they gained employment in their jobs to ensure they can undertake their job independently. Then for a couple of years, I worked for a national charity that supported people with pen disabilities. So I gained experience working with anybody, regardless their disability. I worked with people who had spinal injuries, who had various learning disabilities or MS, and just really all kinds of disabilities. And the last 8 to 9 years, I started working in the sight loss sector. Worked for a national organisation for a couple of years as an employment advisor, where I was responsible providing support to blind and partially sighted on all aspects of employment in face-to-face settings. I also run a couple of group sessions, and I worked on the national employment line that was obviously reaching out across the 4 countries of the United Kingdom. And the last year and a bit, I've been working for Support for Sight, which is a local charity in Essex. I'm managing the employment program, so I work with anybody who is in working age. I offer advice on job seeking, retention, self-employment and voluntary work for anybody who is blind and partially sighted.
Oh, so a wealth of experience. So what's your what do you think the job market is like at the moment? Well, sort of for everybody, but more importantly, obviously, for this video, for people with sight loss.
I think the job market is always a bit tricky for anybody with a disability for kind of the obvious reasons. Mostly the employers are still reluctant to maybe employ disabled people, and most commonly they're not sure about the support that's available, which is actually obviously free when they're taking somebody on. But the market is quite good. I think one of the things that people, job seekers people, need to be aware of, that they have to be relevant for the employer. So whatever job they're looking for, whatever field they would like to go into, they need to think about whether their current skill set are relevant, whether somebody would employ them, whether they have something to offer to the employer. And then I think if the answer is yes on that part, then the sight loss is something that, with access to work, which we're going to cover later, is something that can easily be overcome.
Yeah, we'll talk about access to work. Probably another video on its own, I think, because that's, it's quite a big subject.
Definitely, yeah.
So what about, so obviously you've been supporting people with sight loss for, nearly 10 years. So what generally are the main concerns of people with sight loss?
From my experience, one of the biggest difficulties is my clients tend to be unemployed for a period of time when I meet them. That can be, a year, 6 months, sometimes it's years and years and years, and they usually don't really have the confidence in themselves. They would like to work, they would like to be part of society, but they don't necessarily understand if they are still relevant to an employment or the employment market. So lack of confidence is definitely there. Also, even job seekers are not aware of the support and their rights, so they don't understand if they go into a job situation what they can get and how they can get that support, and they're not understanding what support is available. And also they fear they may be judged because they think they might not going to be able to perform to the standard as somebody who's fully sighted, but actually obviously you and I, we both know that if you are able to use technology, you can be just as productive as anybody else.
So yeah, you have hit on some really sort of real crucial points there around confidence and things like that, and obviously we have to consider when applying for jobs, things like CVs and interview techniques, bit around disclosure, but they're such big topics that I think we're going to do separate videos for those, so we can actually go into them in a little bit more depth, if it's okay.
Good idea.
One of the questions that lots of people ask on our Facebook groups and things like that is whether they should mention, so to disclose their sight loss within their application.
Okay, so as you said, is a question that always comes up and is a very sensitive one, and I think everybody they treat it differently regarding how they feel maybe about their sight loss. Somebody would like to mention it. Some people absolutely kind of got to terms with their sight loss and they're more comfortable raising it straight away to an employer. I have a general advice, but obviously I will encourage everybody to do the things that is right for them. But my advice would be, if you're doing a CV or a covering letter, it's the best if you don't mention it, that you have that conversation when you may be offered an interview and then you disclose your disability as much as it would affect you to do that interview. If you're doing an application form and the employer maybe has a section on Equality, Equality Act 2000 and in terms of equal opportunities, or they have a monitoring form but they collect their information, then again, I think it's absolutely fine to say, yes, I consider myself a disabled person. I wouldn't necessarily go into the different registration, whether you're severely sight impaired, whether you sight impaired. Most people don't really understand what that means. I would just say overall, maybe call yourself a person with a visual impairment. And again, when you have the phone call for an interview, you can go into more details. What support would you need to do the interview? So it's just depending on the situation. I definitely wouldn't put it into a CV under a personal profile. I don't think that somebody's skill set, experience, ability to do a job will be defined whether they're visually impaired or not.
Yeah.
So that's the advice. But just going back at the beginning, I think is depending on and varies from person to person.
Yeah.
So when I do, we talk about disclosure, and obviously we will do a video on it later. There is something I have a discussion on with my client. How do they feel? Where are they in their sight loss journey? Obviously, if it's very recent and maybe they're very emotional about it and they maybe get a bit teary talking about it, then obviously I do advise them to to think about it, how they can explain this in a way that they stay as much as they can as a matter of fact, because obviously that would be an emotional outburst for a potential employer, could be quite negative at an interview, for example.
Yeah. That's really good advice. I think it's important that we do a separate video on that. I do.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm happy to do it if you would like me to do it.
Yeah, that would be really good. That's a really good idea. So we'll do that. We're part of the series. I just need to mention actually that if you can hear something moving about, Woody, my guide dog, is trotting about because we're filming from my house. So you might hear him trotting about in the background. He's just laid down very relaxed now, so hopefully he'll go back to sleep. I know the thing that you're very passionate about is actually getting people sort of work skills going, and I know you're very interested in people doing voluntary work as a part of way of doing that. Do you just want to sort of tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's going back again what I just said in the beginning of this video, that most of my clients are unemployed when they are going on to the job seeking journey of their life. So they not necessarily maybe understand, or maybe they don't remember anymore what work looks like in terms of getting up, getting ready, getting to an office, doing a couple of hours a day and then getting home. So and also maybe their skills, as I mentioned, they may be not relevant, or maybe just a bit rusty and they need a little bit of time and a little bit of practice to kind of get back to how their skills were before, maybe how fast they used to type. If you're not typed for a couple of years, obviously might not going to be able to touch type again straight away. So voluntary work is a very good way for people to kind of, for various reasons. Number one, you can decide whether work is actually what you want to do. Then you can decide what type of work and how many hours would you like to work. So if you're volunteering, 8 hours a week, and potentially is making you absolutely exhausted and giving you headaches and eye strain and various other things, then obviously maybe you need to think about realistic job roles and job goals in order to go back into paid employment. It can also help, obviously, with, as I said, just getting your skills going again, obviously maintaining your existing skills, definitely gaining new skills, gaining new experience and new knowledge about maybe things have changed since you've been last working, you've been work. And it's just sometimes people in my experience have an idea. They think they would like to do something, like for example they really like, I don't know, their children, so they want to work in the nursery, and then they go and volunteer in the nursery, and 2 weeks later they realize that they really like their children but not anybody else's children. So it's a good way to kind of find out for yourself, is that job that you're
Yeah,
thinking to do, or that not necessarily even the job, but that field, is that for
that
you?
feels a test,
Where
test, test
it's a
water,
good
test.
test. It's a good test, and obviously, depending on what benefit, people are usually supported in terms of the job centre. So you can go and do voluntary work. Obviously, you might want to mention it to your work coach that you're doing something. Is totally an okay thing to do. Obviously, you shouldn't be doing like hundreds of hours a week, but 10, 12 hours is absolutely fine.
Absolutely.
The only downside for the voluntary work is, which we're going to talk about later, is access to work. The access to work isn't supporting. So technology-wise, there is a big
Yeah,
issue. But so far, I have been mostly able to advise clients on technology that maybe they already have, or it can be downloaded from the internet. I also loaned
yeah,
screens out. So there is always usually a way about most of the time that somebody can do voluntary work despite having the funding from Access to Work. And it's just a great way to see, is this really what I want? And also, sorry, the last thing of the benefit of volunteering is when you're having the interview, the employer would really like to know why you are kind of relevant to them. And if you're bringing up an experience, which is doesn't matter if it's voluntary work, but you're bringing up an experience that you
yeah.
have, which is a couple of weeks, months old, you're going to be more relevant than if you say, no, sorry, I was just sitting at home the last 2 years.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it shows commitment, it shows
It,
willingness, it shows all the positive things that despite your situation, you're actually getting out and doing something. And then obviously it has major impact usually on people's mental health, because they're
it
part
does.
of
It's
something.
really,
They achieve to get to the voluntary work. They may be using their mobility aids, which they weren't using. They belong to an organization. They maybe even go out Friday to a pub for a drink, and have
yeah.
Christmas dinners, and it just brings,
It's
it gets the person back from who was potentially a bit isolated because of the visual impairment, gets them back into
absolutely. I
community.
absolutely agree with you. I think it's very important for all of those things: confidence, motivation, as as you say, being relevant to an employer.
Yeah,
Okay, that's really great, and it's really good advice around voluntary work. It is so important. So just at sort of the end of this video then, before we thank you for your time, what are your top tips? What are your takeaways around job seeking and applying for employment?
I think the crucial thing is think about really what work should look like for you, including what type of job you would like to go, how much would you like to earn, what hours you would be able to work physically, realistically. Think about all the other commitments you might have in your life in terms of having children or having an elderly parent that you might need to look after. Just really think through what would be the perfect situation, and then make sure that your skills are relevant. So do some voluntary work, or go and do some course, or just do something that would help you on the way to be more employable.
Great. Well, Gigi, really thank you for your time. As
You're
we've sort of
welcome.
mentioned several times, so we're going to do several more videos
Yeah,
around employment and those specific areas that we need to consider. Um, but really thank you for your time.
you're
Uh,
welcome.
and just to say that obviously we have the ability to claim benefits as well whilst we're still in work or looking for
Of
work.
course.
And we'll cover those as well. So anyway, thank you
Great.
for your time, and
You're
we'll see you on the
welcome.
next video.
All
Cheers.
right. Bye.
Well, I hope you found that video interesting. As you can see, Juji has a great deal of knowledge, and we're going to be doing a series of videos on all aspects of employment for people with sight loss, covering things like interview techniques, covering letters, that sort of thing moving forward. So keep an eye out for them. You might want to consider joining the Working Age and Young People's Facebook group, which the Macular Society has opened. It's a closed group and a really strong community with loads of people giving good, strong advice in all areas of living with macular disease, whether that's employment advice or just day-to-day life with living with MD. Now, like all the other videos we've started to create, we're going to put them on YouTube. So the Macular Society has its own YouTube channel, so why not subscribe? And then you'll get notifications as new videos turn up, either on employment or other bits and pieces that the Macular Society are recording. If you want any more information about employment, you can always give me a call. The best way to get me is through the Advice and Information Service, and as usual that number is 0300 30 30 111. Keep an eye out for the next video and we'll see you soon.